The January Grand Sumo Tournament begins in just 6 days, but the far more interesting thing will be happening in 21 days. Will we have a new Yokozuna? We'll discuss it today on the New to Sumo
Let's start
podcast.
the show. New to sumo, here we go.
Well, the last tournament that we had left us in a very interesting situation because, in a kind of unusual set of circumstances, we have two potential Yokozuna bids at the same time. Kotozakura won the last tournament with a 14-1 record, and Hoshoryu came in second place with a 13-2 record. And there's precedent for both to potentially become a Yokozuna if either of them wins this tournament that's coming up. Obviously, Kotozakura to win two in a row, that's a guarantee. But Hoshoryu, even if he wins this one, having not won the last, the cumulative score would probably be enough. So we're really looking at two simultaneous rope runs, and that's a really exciting thing we haven't had in a very long time. Between the two, I don't even know where the betting favorite would be. It's a really exciting moment.
Absolutely. I mean, it has been over 45 years, I think, since we had a double Yokozuna promotion at the same time. And, fortunately for us, both of those men went on to become great Yokozuna. But, you've got Kotozakura, who is, the hot hand. He is, the grandson of a great Yokozuna. He is the son of a longtime upper Sanyaku guy. Sumo is just in his blood. Of course, there's a reason that Hoshoryu is nicknamed nephew, and that's because his uncle is, one of the greatest sumo wrestlers of all time, Asashoryu. So both of them just have incredible sumo legacies, and it would just be so incredible to see this next generation of sumo wrestler, you know, both get it done, not just get it done this year, but get it done potentially on the very same day. Like, that would just be incredible.
So what would need to happen for a simultaneous Yokozuna promotion?
So for a simultaneous Yokozuna promotion, it would most likely need to consist of Hoshoryu winning this tournament outright and Kotozakura being second place by within probably one win. I would say that a probably the easiest scenario for both of them would be both of them to go 12-3 with Hoshoryu winning a playoff between the two of them. That would probably be the easiest thing that guarantees promotion because Hoshoryu would have his 12-3 U show plus a 13 win tournament from last time. Then you'd have Kotozakura with 26 wins over two tournaments plus a U show. Like 12-3, I think is the magic number for both of them. But in the event that someone like, our returning Yokozuna Terunofuji or resurging Onosato or somebody way down there who, we'll talk about later. If one of them just has an amazing tournament and either Kotozakura or Hoshoryu, are maybe about two wins behind in the running, it may be just a little bit tougher. But, I think both of them should feel confident that 12 is their magic number heading into this tournament.
Now, the reason that we have to put a huge asterisk on all our enthusiasm is that
Hmm.
although Kotozakura and Hoshoryu just had both amazing tournaments in November, they were coming off of two very disappointing tournaments between the two of them in September. So the possibility that neither of them wins this U show is extremely high still.
Well, we spent, pretty much all of last year just sort of marveling at how much parity there seems to be in sumo right now, especially when our Yokozuna Terunofuji has been absent. To just sort of point out how incredible Terunofuji is. Prior to Kotozakura winning the last tournament, he was the only wrestler in the last 3 years to have a 14 win U show, and he'd done so three times in that span. So, it really just highlights how much of a difference there is between the tippy tippy top and everyone else. It's why people who may complain about Terunofuji, taking too much time off, and not being a great Yokozuna, may not fully appreciate just how good he is, even when he's only at like 50% of his strength. And that is the kind of thing that we want from Kotozakura and Hoshoryu. And up until this past November, we had never seen that. November was by far the best tournament that either one of those two Ozeki had ever had. So it is completely understandable to not have confidence that either of them can replicate that, in a second month, especially with Terunofuji expected to come back, and try to, knock them down a peg to reestablish himself as the King of Kings.
Well, Terunofuji returning for this next tournament is really the wild card. And the history has indicated that when he completes tournaments, he wins them. That has been the case for the vast majority of the last several years. So I think that if he's going to be in this and he's really going to be sticking in it, he's the most likely person to win this Yusho, not Kotozakura or Hoshoryu. Of course, typically if he's going to bow out, we find out very quickly, usually within the first few days. And it makes him a very difficult person to bet on in something like a Kachi Clash, which we're going to get into momentarily. But I figure it's worth just mentioning some of the other likely picks of who might win the tournament if it's not Hoshoryu or Kotozakura or Terunofuji. Who would we say are the other few that might be up for a Yusho?
But we have to go with the two other guys that have won tournaments in the last year, and that is Onosato, who won a tournament from both, I believe, Komusubi and Sekiwake, or was it Mid Maegashira and Komusubi, one of the two. But Onosato has just been, the hot hand all year. I think he was like second in Sumo in total wins this past year, and the fact that he's beaten everybody in the upper Sanyaku at least twice this past year, he is by far the most likely to play spoiler to a Yokozuna run. You've also got Wakataka Kage, who welcome back to the Sanyaku Wakataka Kage after dealing with a serious knee injury. He's a guy that's likely to get double-digit wins. I don't think he's had fewer than double-digit wins since coming back to this level. He's someone that has also won a tournament, so you can't count him out. And then if you just go down the list, you've got a bunch of guys that have won tournaments from higher positions on this Banzuke, like Kirishima, like uh okay, Kirishima's the only one that like Shodai, like Tamawashi, those are guys that have done it, probably not in a position to do it now, but the place that you really have to be careful of is the bottom of the Banzuke, because you've got Takeru Fuji, who seems to be recovered from his injury. And finally, after a year and a half, we have the prodigal son Hakuoho making his triumphant return to the top division. And that's another person we got to talk about a little bit later. But suffice it to say, Kotozakura and Hoshoryu should not be the overwhelming favorite to win it all, even if they're, maybe the slight betting favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really stacked division right now. It's so
Hmm.
interesting because so many of the conversations about a year ago were about how some of the best talent were all out injured in that moment, and it was very frustrating. And that could explain also some of the unusual parity we were seeing in those moments. Like for example, I'll never forget. I think it was November 2022 when Takakeisho won the tournament on an 11-4 playoff because there were no standout stars in the moment. So many people were injured then. And it's really refreshing to see not only some of the top guys really performing and belonging in the higher Sanyaku, but also in the lower divisions, sorry, the lower rank and file, some really talented people who are pulling double-digit wins. It's great to see Hakuoho back and Wakataka Kage back. It's really refreshing, all of this health and all of this talent. And I think the only thing that's missing from it is the one guy who's winning every tournament. But at the same time, we can definitely call that a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 2024 was, I think, as we predicted, it would be a sort of changing of the guard here. You saw a lot of guys that, had their shot and just, proved that they're no longer, the guy, and they'll just kind of be living out the rest of their career, just kind of trying to vie for their Kachikoshi every tournament. You had some unfortunate retirements as well. But the real story of the year was to see these rising stars like Onosato, Terunofuji, and Hoshoryu and Kotozakura really establish themselves. And, this might be the year where we see those guys firmly establish themselves as, not just up and comers, but the future of sumo, not just the future of sumo, but the present of sumo, the guys that will always be in contention for a title by days 10 through 15.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I think 2025 is going to be a big year. I think we're really going to see that. I think my big prediction for the year is that at some point this year, I hesitate to say it's going to be this tournament, but at some point in 2025, I think we will get a new Yokozuna. I think probably in the first half of 2025, even it's still possible.
Mm.
But that would be really exciting. I would say most likely if it doesn't happen in this tournament, it's probably going to be delayed by many months. But anything's possible. So now might be a great moment to start talking about our Kachi Clash predictions. And for those viewers who are new, who aren't familiar, Kachi Clash is one of several websites that exist where you can place picks on who you think is going to get the most wins in the upcoming tournaments. Like many others, it's divided into several categories where you pick one person from the Yokozuna and Ozeki ranks, one person from Sekiwake and Komusubi, one person from the top five Maegashira, the next five, and then the final seven ranks. And so we are going to exchange our picks. Mine are already visible on screen. And then one thing that's also worth mentioning is that the New to Sumo podcast has its own stable that you can join, and I'll make sure to include a link to it in the description of this video where you can join and you can compete against us in the tournaments. And probably you'll crush me, and you'll compete pretty seriously against my partner here who has won the tournaments before.
All right. Yeah, I can't wait for it. This is finally going to be my sixth Kashi Clash, so I'll finally figure out what my actual rank is compared to everyone else. Winning that tournament, and I think it was just my second one, was fun, but I'd like to be a serious, contender for Yokozuna to whoever it is right now. I forget. But yeah, let's start with our picks in the upper Sanyaku. But what's your personal pick, Ben?
So I must say also, whenever I've shown my predictions for these, I typically change them the day before the tournament or an hour before the tournament begins. But at least as far as what I have right now, I have Kotozakura. Uh, I hesitate to pick Terunofuji just because of the possibility of another injury flare-up mid-tournament. Hoshoryu, I just feel like we've seen too much inconsistency in the last few tournaments where, for all we know, he's going to end up getting 8 or 9 wins. Whereas Kotozakura, I think, is a little bit more stable for a double-digit tournament. And then Onosato, he's coming off of a weaker tournament. I'm sure he can turn it around. But between the three, Kotozakura seemed like the more stable pick if you want to get those secure points. They all have excellent potential, though. For all we know, Onosato could go 13-2, Terunofuji could go 15-0, but I went with Kotozakura. How about you?
See, I actually went with Onosato. So m my expectation is that what we saw in November was a bit of an aberration, and but not just from Kotozakura and Hoshoryu, but also from Onosato. Onosato's habit since moving to the top division always seems to be, he starts at a particular rank, kind of needs to get his feet under himself, and then he just goes hog wild in the very next tournament. I mean, it was literally all he did in throughout 2024. He had a good tournament in January, and then March stepped it up in and before stepping it up in May. Then he sort of adapted in September with just a 9-6, and then he stepped it up with a 13-2 in November. Then he had to adjust to being an Ozeki in November, and I think January is going to be where we see another 12-3, 13-2 from him, which is why, and I also think that he's just gonna play spoiler to Kotozakura and Hoshoryu, which is why he is my pick. And as far as Terunofuji goes, I wouldn't pick Terunofuji in any circumstance unless all of the other guys in his category were Kadoban. So yeah, that's never gonna be an issue for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's not at all to say that we don't believe in Terunofuji's skill and ability. It's always just a question of whether he completes the tournament. And that's rarely been the case. But
Oh
but
yeah,
when
it's
he
it's
competes, he's the best by far.
yeah, I mean, the issue with Terunofuji has never been his skill. It's always been, his knees, and if those knees can hold up. The good news is he's had a solid, I think, 6 months since his 5 months since his last in-ring appearance to heal up. So, he should be good to go with all the training that he's done.
Yeah, makes sense. In the next set of wrestlers to choose from, we have Wakamoto Haru, Daieisho, Abi, and Wakataka Kage. Have to make a quick note about Abi, who's coming off of a very impressive 11-4 showing at M3. Now he's already back up into the Sanyaku. And of course, Wakataka Kage, his first time back since his injury in the Sanyaku. So some really tough choices here. Honestly, you can't go wrong with any of these picks other than probably whichever one I end up picking, which at the moment is Wakamoto Haru, and regrettably so. Who do you have?
I have Wakataka Kage. I think he's just been hot. The fact is, he is, well, actually, two other guys in this area have won tournaments before, but I think he still hasn't reached his peak yet as far as what he's capable of. And, it sure as heck helps that he is, I believe, the youngest of the four guys there, which feels pretty comforting, knowing that he's got a lot more sumo in front of him than behind him. So, I think that he's the pick for this one. I'm not saying he'll go 12-3, but it feels like his floor is a lot higher than for guys like Daisho, Wakamoto Haru, and Abi, all of whom had losing records from these positions last year, which is, I think, what makes me most concerned about all of them.
Yeah, my reason for going with Makamoto Haru here is that he just came off of a double-digit tournament
Mm.
in the Sanyaku ranks. He's very consistent, or mostly very consistent in Sanyaku at getting strong showings, whereas Abi, he's just a yo-yo. I mean, he will absolutely crush it in the high M's and then drop down next tournament once he's back in Sanyaku. Wakataka Kage has absolutely that ceiling, but he just seems to be competing at an unsustainably high level in the way I see it right now. At a certain point, he's going to have his drop off tournament. Most wrestlers typically have a tournament after several really impressive ones where they decline slightly. We just saw that with Onosato in the last one. So I just wouldn't be too surprised if that happens for him here. And Daieisho's coming off a weak tournament, 8-7, where I feel like maybe he's struggling with injury or something form related. Wakamoto Haru to me just seems like the steady hand at the moment.
Yeah, Daisho, I mean, I think he is where he is right now. He's actually had three straight 8-7 tournaments. So I think he's in a place where, if you're scared to death of the guys in this area because of injuries, Daisho probably has the highest floor out of all of them because he's unlikely to get fewer than 6 or 7 wins, but he's just also unlikely to get more than like 9 wins from where he is and where he's been. So, I just think that Wakataka Kage is comparable to him right now and has a higher ceiling. So, yeah, Wakataka Kage and Wakamoto Haru, one of those guys is probably gonna wind up being the best bet.
Makes sense. So the next picks that we have to choose from are in the M1 through M5 region.
Mhm.
So we're looking at, I'll just quickly run through Takanosho, Kirishima, Tobizaru, Atamifuji, Gonoyama, Oho, Shodai, Ura, Umi, and Shioshoma.
Man, these are
We
a lot of guys that had some good tournaments and some bad tournaments last year, and it makes it so hard to feel like comfortable about any of them because all of them are capable of, you know, putting up like a double digit win from this area and, or like 5-10, 4-11 on their worst days. That's what makes this so darn frustrating.
Absolutely. Well, if you want to go with the really safe pick here, who I might highly recommend would be Atami Fuji. You are guaranteed to have at least 7 or 8 wins if you go with Atami Fuji. He has gone 8-7 or 7-8 in all of the last 5 or 6 tournaments. In this exact position, he is just stable. He's probably going to be at M2 for the next 8 years, the way he's been competing. So that's a really safe pick. Toby Zaru's had great tournaments, but not usually this high up. Takanosho has had some really excellent tournaments recently. And then you have Shodai, who belongs probably exactly where he is. Gonoyama always seems like he's on the brink of completely breaking out and competing with the best of the best in the tournaments. And Ura, who just magically gets wins from the brink of destruction in extremely entertaining ways and is by far a crowd favorite among the sumo fan community. So there's a lot of really fun people in this group here. Can't forget Harada Umi either, who recently came down from I think he was in Sanyaku recently. My pick, which I'll probably change at some point, is Gonoyama at the moment. He's coming off of a really strong tournament. He's competed pretty well in this area in the past, although I'm probably going to change it most likely. Gonoyama is who I have at the moment. Who do you have?
I have a Tommy Fuji at the moment for the exact reasons that we discussed. I think he has the highest floor, which is kind of important to me for tournaments like this. But, there is one guy that we forgot to mention that is just kind of
Oh,
hovering around this area, and that is Kirishima.
of course, how could I
But,
forget?
2023 was without a doubt his year. He won 2 tournaments. He was promoted to Ozeki. He finished 2023 on a Yokozuna rope run after just an amazing November 2023. And then it just all fell apart as soon as Terunofuji yeeted him out of the ring. He was never the same after that. Granted, he did deal with a neck injury that cost him, a whole bunch of wins and even a couple of tournaments. But, when you have an injury like that, it messes with you psychologically more than physically. And I think the last 2 or 3 tournaments have shown that the days of Kirishima being capable of stringing together 3 straight tournaments of like 11, 12, 13 wins are behind him. I think he is going to morph into a sort of coin flip, competitor where you flip a coin this month he's gonna get 11 wins. Flip a coin this month he's getting 6 wins. Flip a coin 10, 7, 12. He might win another 2 or 3 tournaments, but I think I'm ready to accept that he won't be a Yokozuna contender and might not even be an Ozeki ever again.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there, and it's a shame. But at the same time, you can't have 10 different Yokozuna in the same moment. You can't have 10 guys who are crushing it. As one comes up, one must go down. That's the beauty of sumo, and it's also the tragedy of sumo. As people like Onosato, Hoshoryu, and Kotozakura just get better and better, they got to beat some people along the way. And that person for many recently has been Kirishima, unfortunately. As guys like Wakataka Kage come back up and Abi have great tournaments, someone's taking those losses. And so yeah, it seems like Kirishima is maybe he's a different he belongs in a different position on the Banzuke now than where we got comfortable seeing him in the previous 2 years. So it's a shame to see, but also he's going to have some great successes and still get some serious money from the position he's in. He's going to get the occasional upset and kinboshis. So still happy for him and wishing him the best in this one. But he is not my pick. Definitely not my pick.
Yep, same. All right, moving down to the fourth tier.
Yep, so we have another 10 to choose from here. Takayasu, Ichi Yamamoto, Endo, Mitakeumi, Roga, Takarafuji, Churano Umi, Oshoma, Tamawashi, and Meisei. And I went with another steady, reliable hand for this one, which was Tamawashi. Who do you have?
Tamawashi, the Iron Man. No, that's not quite my pick. I'm going with Takayasu. I think that I used a lot of math for this one. So believe it or not, Takanosho, our current Maegashira one, had two runner-up tournaments from this exact spot this past year, from Maegashira 6. And Takayasu is a guy that's capable of, winning about like 10 to 12 matches, from below the joy of Maegashira 1 through 5. I think this might actually be like the perfect position for someone of his skill and strength to really just get a lot of like potentially easy wins early in the tournament, but before having to, deal with the likes of like the Sanyaku and stuff. So, Takayasu, the big grizzly bear, hairy backed, gorilla of a man. I think he's a strong pick for this position, and I'd be pleasantly surprised. I'd be, well, not pleasantly, but I'd be quite surprised if he wound up with fewer than 9 wins from where he's been placed right now.
Yeah, I thought about Takayasu, but my biggest concern with him is that he's secretly still fighting injury. Not to mention his age. I feel like he's wearing down or dealing with some kind of underlying injury. He's missed time in three of the last six tournaments, and the part that makes me suspicious is that in the last two, he lost all of his final three matches. Specifically, in the last tournament, he gets his Kachikoshi, has his 8 wins, and proceeds to lose the next three. He didn't bow out of the tournament, but it seems like a situation where he's trying to get the Kachikoshi, and now that he's got it, he can relax a bit. That's something that I feel like we've seen in different situations, most notably with Takakeisha recently, where we know someone is dealing with an injury. So I think that's my concern more so than his ability to perform, is that he's actually dealing with an injury still that could potentially take him out of the tournament. Also, being at the M6 rank means he's going to be facing some pretty tough competition at a certain point, most likely, compared to who he's been facing off against in the last two. So he's excellent. I mean, he's a near Sanyaku caliber wrestler even today, but I just worry about some of those underlying things. And Tamawashi has just been very consistent lately. And I think, what you want in those lower ranks is just someone who can get you reliable points. Like we said about Atami Fuji having a high floor. Tamawashi, same exact thing. He's had a 7-8 or 8-7 record in all of the last seven tournaments, if my math is correct. So I think when you're making picks for this competition, having someone with a high floor can be just as important, if not more so, than someone with a high ceiling and a high risk attached to them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But ain't no way you argued against me picking Takayasu based on his age when you're picking the 40-year-old Tamawashi as your pick.
Yeah, no,
Ain't
you're
no
absolutely
way.
right. You're absolutely right. But Tamawashi, he's like a fine wine. He only gets better with age. Um,
Surely, surely.
yes, and then in our last category of picks, there are too many people for me to possibly name them all at the moment. But I'll just quickly say that I'm going with Takeru Fuji, who's ranked at M11. Who do you have?
I have Tamashoho, the newcomer. There's something that we saw a lot in the past like year or two is a lot of first timers in the Maegashira rank. They really seem to do pretty well, frequently getting like 9, 10, sometimes even 11 wins from their debut in that position. And I think maybe the fact that Tamashoho is just brand new to so many of these guys is maybe going to make it a lot harder for them to figure him out early, and I just love, the way he bites the towel before his matches. So I'm sure rooting for him. But that said, I can understand that he is hardly going to be the preferred pick. I will be shocked if anyone other than Takeru Fuji or Hakuoho get more than maybe a few dozen picks in this tournament. For those who don't even remember Hakuoho, back in July 2023, he made his debut in the upper division at the age of just 19 and just absolutely mowed guys down and wound up contending for the tournament title on the final day. He lost to Hoshoryu and suffered an injury along the way, and it cost him a whole bunch of tournaments. But he came back, wasn't quite as dominant, but steadily climbed his way back up, and now he's here. And I think he'll probably wind up being the second favorite pick after Takerufuji from this position. And Takerufuji, of course, won the tournament in his debut back in, I believe it was March of last year. So, who also dealt with injuries right afterwards. But like both of those guys, extremely strong picks. I mean, you certainly can go wrong, if they don't perform well. But totally see why they're going to be so popular.
Yeah, and I think Hakuoho is a great pick and going to be a very popular one. The reason I hesitate is because of his slow performances in Juryo.
Mm.
Some of the wrestlers that he's facing off against and struggled against that were in the Juryo division, some of them he'll be seeing again in this tournament and possibly struggle against them again. But then also just the fact that it seems like it's going to take him some time to recapture that strength that he had when he first came up. At the same time, he's a year or two older than he was then, so maybe he's quite a bit stronger than he was then and could perform even better than what we saw. All I'll say is, at least for now, I have Takeru Fuji because when he's been up, he's been great. He's been really reliable. And so I trust him again, the guy who's done it before. I also think that there's something about getting that bear off your back and having won a tournament before that just gives you a newfound strength. I feel like we've seen that with some of the guys who can just pull through in a tournament when they need to get more wins because they've done it before. They don't have that big hurdle to still overcome. And Hakuoho hasn't done it yet, so I think Takeru Fuji, between the two anyway, would be my pick.
Fair enough. All right. So let's wrap it up by asking one simple question. Will we have a new Yokozuna in 21 days from now, or a new Yokozuna up for nomination in 21 days from now?
I gotta say no. I would love to see it. I would love to be proven wrong here. But if you just look at the recent performances of the two guys that we're talking about here, Kotozakura and Hoshoryu, and who they're up against, I just don't see it. I think we're much more likely to see Terunofuji or Onosato or somebody else. Maybe a surprise win by Wakataka Kage or Takeru Fuji or something else, but I just don't see it happening.
I have to agree with you, and I'll even take it a step further, to be honest. I'm not sure that we're going to get a new Yokozuna this year. I honestly think that we have so much talent in the Sanyaku right now that all of our Yokozuna runs for the next few tournaments are just going to constantly spoil one another. We'll have Onosato win a tournament, but then he gets spoiled by Kotozakura and Hoshoryu, who are in turn spoiled by maybe Terunofuji again in his last hurrah. And I just don't think that we're going to see a new Yokozuna this year, until someone truly establishes themselves as a consistent alpha dog, not just an alpha dog for one, maybe even two tournaments.
Yeah, it wouldn't be so hard to predict a new Yokozuna if everyone in the tournament wasn't just so damn good. I mean, there's just so many great competitors now, which is such a nice thing, but that means that there's just too much competition for the guys who are vying for it. I don't see the one guy who can just mow everyone down at the moment. I could definitely see several different guys getting 11, 12 wins. I could see a five-way playoff between some of these great guys, but I don't know if I see a new Yokozuna just yet.
So who is your pick, your outright pick to win the entire tournament?
Oh man, I mean, with the news that Terunofuji might be competing, I weirdly think he's the most likely, not over 50%, but I give him probably the best odds out of anybody. It's basically to me, Terunofuji maybe has 30% chance to win it, and then the field just splits the rest of that to so many fractions that they're all less likely than him. I think Onosato has a really great chance too, just having won two tournaments in the last year. He's just got that pedigree. He's at Ozeki. Um, I'd say Terunofuji, then maybe Onosato, and then maybe Kotozakura and Hoshoryu.
I agree. I don't completely agree. My pick is Onosato. I think that what we saw in November is kind of the floor for him, and we're probably going to get about 12 or 13 wins from him this month. I think Terunofuji probably I think he's probably in contention all the way to the end and might even wind up facing Onosato in a playoff or something. But ultimately, I think this is going to be Onosato's tournament, and he'll be free to have his Yokozuna run ruined by Kotozakura and Hoshoryu in March.
Such is the way of sumo.
Exactly.
Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll definitely check in with you after the tournament, see how it goes, see if we're crowning someone new or if our pessimism comes true. But enjoy the tournament, and we'll see you guys then.
Take care, everybody.
Bouts and shouts your weekly treat. Every champion you'll meet. Ring the gong, it's time to learn. Sumo tales at every turn. New to Sumo Podcast Fun.